Hi, my name is Julia Bloechl. I'm a member of the class of 2020. My major is in international studies with a concentration in ethics and social justice, and my minor is in managing for social impact. During the summer of 2019, I traveled to Kigali, Rwanda, thanks to a grant given to me by the Center for Human Rights and International Justice. In Kigali, where I was from June 19th to 27th, I first attended a conference called Reinventing Theology in Rwanda, Challenges and Hopes for the Future. It was organized by Father Elise Rutagambwa and Father Marcel Uwineza. Father Marcel actually just received his PhD from the theology department at Boston College. During my time in Kigali, I stayed in Center Christus, which is a Jesuit center in the Ramera section or district of Kigali. Center Christus was one of the first locations of massacres during the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994, as a number of priests were killed on April 7th. At Center Christus, they maintain a memorial for these priests, but the center also continues to be the location of a church, a very active and lively church, as well as a number of rooms where Jesuits stay, but also people visiting Rwanda are allowed to rent out rooms. Kigali itself, it's the capital of Rwanda. It, since the genocide, has done very well. It's very green, known to be a very green city, very environmentally conscientious. It's very beautiful, and economically, it's been doing well in the previous couple of decades. But it was also the center of a lot of the chaos and the killing that took place during the genocide in 1994. So first, during the conference, I heard presentations from a number of speakers, including testimonies from people who lived through the genocide, the presentations from members of the church hierarchy in Rwanda, including priests and bishops. And we heard from scholars from all around the world who came to talk about religious themes and also political and legal themes pertinent to the Rwandan genocide. And also, we heard from members of the community who were just in attendance at the conference who were clearly very eager to share their stories. I learned a lot just from hearing from them, and I also realized that in Rwanda there is sort of a lack of opportunity for people who lived through the genocide to be able to share the trauma that they experienced, and there's a clear desire and need for this to this day. From the testimonies of people who presented, I learned about some of the support groups that exist in Rwanda for survivors. I also learned about the profound ways people continue to suffer from the consequences of what they experienced in 1994. And I got a bit of a sense of what people are yearning for, namely, in a lot of ways, recognition of the guilt of a lot of key parts of Rwandan society, especially the church. From religious personnel, from church hierarchy, I learned about how the church has attempted to help Rwandans move past or deal with the pain that they experienced in the aftermath of the genocide, and how the church is working to more adequately own up to its own role during the genocide. I learned that there's, for instance, attention being paid to how better to form members of the seminarians, so that they more adequately serve the church's mission in Rwanda and fight injustice and violence instead of partaking in it as they did during the genocide. And from scholars, I learned a lot about how society can and perhaps ought to encourage forgiveness, and whether that's even possible in the aftermath of large-scale atrocities like this, where encouraging forgiveness can actually serve to delegitimize the pain of victims and survivors. I learned a little bit about how we can conceptualize of a post-genocide theology. Namely, I learned that liberation theology in this case might be the most adequate in dealing with the pain of survivors. And I learned a lot about how important and how crucial it is for Rwanda to root its theology in an understanding of suffering and in an understanding of the importance of remembrance. Amnesia will not do in the aftermath of such a large-scale atrocity. And I also learned a little bit about the righteous role of anger. In cases like that of post-genocide Rwanda, it would be unrealistic and perhaps unjust to completely neglect any feelings of anger or any sort of lingering feelings of outrage at injustice. but of course, the conference only lasted a few days, and I stayed on afterwards to explore Kigali and to learn a little bit from the memorials and museums in Rwanda. Um, for instance, I took a couple trips to the Kigali Genocide Memorial Museum, which actually serves as a burial ground for a number of victims of the genocide in Rwanda. And the museum, some of the things I found interesting, first, they actually note that the colonial era had some benefits for Rwanda, including the fact that it ushered in Christianity. So Christianity is a really important part of the Rwandan identity. It remains the predominant religion, despite the church's role in co-opting the genocide, or being at least failing to help stop the genocide. I also learned a bit about the long-lasting unity between Tutsi, Twa, and Hutu, or the lack of sort of contentious ideas that came with those identities. And in fact, the divisiveness came in mostly with colonial powers and the way that they sort of appropriated these titles. I learned about the abundance of refugees in neighboring countries after the genocide, and how many Rwandans saw the attention being paid to the refugee crisis as neglecting the pain of Rwandans themselves and taking attention away from dealing with their own pain. But also in the museum, I saw a lot of things that just reminded me of how profoundly recent this genocide was, and how much it scarred the country. There's a room with pictures of victims. The families of victims brought pictures to be hung on walls in this room, and it's completely surrounded by images of these victims. And it just serves as a reminder of how large scale and how recent the atrocity really was. At the end of the museum, they have a video that talks about some of the experiences of family members of survivors or survivors themselves. And there's attention being paid to the fact that there's a lack of post-traumatic psychological support in Rwanda after the genocide, of course, facing such a severe and traumatic atrocity like genocide calls for some sort of psychological support in the aftermath, and that has not really existed in the way it should in Rwanda. I also, with the attendance from the presenters at the conference, went to Nyamata and Natarama Church, which were churches where large-scale killings took place because members of these churches sought safety in them, but were eventually discovered by Hutu killers. So these parishes, as I said, were places where people were killed, but now host the remains of these people, along with the clothes that they were wearing when they were killed. A lot of things like the blood that is on the walls, it stays there from when the murders took place. So it's largely preserved from the day that the killings happened. And it's, of course, very shocking to see these, but also raises a lot of questions concerning how to maintain the dignity of victims and how to properly memorialize them. I spoke to some people about sort of the conflicting idea of wanting to memorialize these people and show the scale of the atrocity that took place, but also feeling like it felt sort of invasive to see their remains in such a brutal and blunt way. And there was clearly a sense of recognition of that fact, but also an understanding of the fact that there is a culture of denial among some in Rwanda, and maintaining these memorials in this way is a clear way to affirm the fact and to prove the fact that this did happen and it was as bad. It was truly as bad as it is said to have been. And it is hard to deny something like that when it's so bluntly open for public viewing. After visiting the churches, I went across the street from Nyamata Church and saw and was able to meet the priest of this new Nyamata Church, who talks a bit about his own ministry after the genocide and his own mission of bringing sort of a spirit of healing and forgiveness to Christians who are part of his faith community. And it really showed a sense of hope for the future of the Rwandan church, and was a really great way to end my visit to Kigali. Overall, my time in Kigali served as a cornerstone for my senior thesis, which is entitled "The Catholic Church and the Genocide Against the Tutsi in Rwanda Towards Theologically Informed Reconciliation and Forgiveness." It was submitted recently and received Scholar of the College and received the Scholar of the College Prize, and none of that would have been possible without the Center for Human Rights and International Justice's support. So thank you very much for your help in allowing me to pursue my research.